Today we continue with our study on karma and the afterlife, ST 48.1. We finish off a bit of where we left off in last study on how rebirth occurs. So today, if you like to read on your own, it's section 6.1.3. Now, one of the fascinating ideas about death is, of course, is rebirth. In many Asian religions, one of the main characteristics, especially in Indian religions and those religions which are influenced by Indian religions, for example, the religions of South and Southeast Asia, we see this constant idea that life continues after death. The question now is, so how are we reborn into this new life? I mentioned this idea before, so this is an important idea, so I'm going to repeat it so that we understand in practical terms how rebirth occurs, and also how we can prepare ourselves in a positive way so that we are not reborn in unhappy states. We are reborn in happy states. Of course, here some people may wonder whether it's rebirth or not. But this is a question which we're not discussing here. But here we assume there is rebirth, and that in our present life we can prepare ourselves. We need to prepare ourselves in such a way. We should live a life of quality so that the afterlife too follows with a similar quality. So in other words, our afterlife, which perhaps is a more meaningful term than death, our afterlife or our next life is a reflection of our present life in many ways. How we behave now, how we live now, in many ways will decide what kind of future life we have. When we say how we live now, it refers to the three doors of action, the three karmic doors, or dwara in Pali. It's also a Sanskrit word, dwara. Dwara means door. Here is a figurative term, three doors of action, that is body, speech and mind. What we express publicly and openly, of course, action of body and speech. The mental aspect is the motivation. Of course, there is karma in our thoughts also. Indeed, the Buddha defines karma as intention. Karma is the action, the deliberate mental state, the conscious mental state behind the action. So, if an action meaning it can be a thought, it can be speech, it can be a bodily action. If the mental state is wholesome, then that karma is wholesome. What does this mean? Wholesome means that action is free from the three roots: greed, hate, delusion. Very simply, greed means desiring something. So if we don't think, speak or act simply because we desire something, then we do not have this idea of greed. To that extent, it is wholesome. Secondly, we do not have the opposite of greed, that is hatred. That means pushing away, disliking something, anger, and so on. Even thought of violence is included here. So this is the second unwholesome roots. So if we do not have this mental state of anger, hatred, to that extent it is wholesome. Now the third one is a bit tricky. The third one is delusion. Only if we're very wise, we can say we're able to distinguish whether there is delusion or not. However, one safe way to know that we are not deluded is to reflect on the idea of impermanence. Whatever we say or do, we know this. We're referring to impermanent states. So as long as you are aware that everything is impermanent, and things that you say, things that you do, and things that you think reflect that kind of understanding, then you can say to that extent there is no delusion. But even then, as I said, as long as we are not awakened, there is always a tinge, at least a tinge of delusion in our actions, and that's what keeps us going on to feel unsatisfactory suffering and so on. So the point here is, in our daily action, we should at least make sure that we do not cultivate greed and its opposite, hatred, this kind of love-hate situation. Another positive way of putting this is, as long as we constantly cultivate loving kindness and imbue our actions with loving kindness to the extent that those actions are wholesome. Loving kindness means we accept ourselves as we are, we accept others as they are, in a positive sense. As a starting point of how we relate to others, by seeing things as they really are. So this big picture, of course, is seeing things as they really are, which is also impermanent. And on a smaller scale, it's the people we deal with, ourselves, others. We also try to see them as they really are. And if we do that without greed, without hatred, we cultivate loving kindness, then to that extent we are creating good karma. Here, good karma is not just a matter of reward. This is not a kind of consequentialist idea. It's not something like, oh, I do this, I get that. So this is another important point you must note here. Our karma is our habitual conduct or habitual behavior, our habits. We become our habits, right? In other words, if we behave in a selfish way, then this selfish attitude becomes natural to us, so to speak. We keep on working in that way, then we attract more of such situations. In this sense, like attract like. And if we are generous, then of course we attract generosity, we attract friends, a situation like that. So karma is what we do and how we become what we do. It's not that these actions have bring some kind of fruit to us that may or may not happen, but we become our action. This is the best way to remember karma. We become our actions. And when we understand what is meant by this, we become our action, then we begin to understand whatever happens to us, whether we feel rewarded by some windfall, or we feel we have a bad patch in life, we begin to understand this is the nature of our life, of samsara, of the uncertainty of life and so on. So karma is not a fixed measure of reward and punishment. It is how we view a situation. This is another aspect of karma, how we view the situation. So if we are wise, then we tend to view karma wisely. In other words, two different people, one wise, one unwise, can experience a certain bad karma, let's say. Let's say something simple. Both A and B, A is wise, B is not wise. Both of them lose same amount of money, let's say. A, being wise, knows, oh, it's okay, it's impermanent, it's just money, I'm healthy, I can still work, and I have my family, and I still can get back what I've lost. But B, who's not wise, will say, oh, this is bad luck, and I'm going to do something about it, and sees fortune tellers, and go on doing more wrong things, and he gets himself into worse situations. So you have this similar, even identical bad situation, but two different people can react differently to it. So here, in other words, karma is not uniform. Karma is very tricky, very capricious, in other words. So when we have wisdom, when we have understanding, then we accept karma as it is. And in doing so, the effect of karma, even if it is negative, will not be lasting, will not be profound, will not be troubling to us. And the benefit of good karma will be even grow or become more profound for us if we are wise. So karma works in this rather tricky way, if you like. So when we talk about rebirth, a lot depends on how we think. And how we think will decide how we behave. And how we behave creates the habits, and the habits create the personality. And then you become this being, so to speak. Take the case of someone who is a killer and a murderer and a rapist. He only comes out at night and looks for victims to kill, rob, rape, and so on. So, what kind of mind does this person have? This person has a stalker's mind, like an animal hunting. So he sleeps in the day and is only active at night, so he becomes nocturnal. And let's say it goes on like this for most of his adult life. Then his mind becomes that of an animal, a stalker, a predator, fierce, violent, calculating. So the mind is that of a fierce animal, let's say in this case. The body is human, the mind is not. Or you could be an addict, right? Then it's like a predator. Or you could be emotionally violent, or it could be exploitative of others. That is like asura mind, if you like. Or it's habitually violent, hurting people, killing them, mass killing. That's the mind of a hell being. So this is the mind of this person, this being. Although the body is human, the mind is not. So this person lives, and then his lifespan, the present lifespan, comes to an end. In other words, the body dies, but the mind moves on. But what mind is that? It's a subhuman mind. Let's say it's the mind of a violent animal. So this consciousness leaves the body, and it seeks a new birth. So what kind of birth will it look? Here again, like will attract like. So this consciousness will float around, so to speak, and be drawn to a similar kind of being. So this person probably will be attracted to, say, a pair of fierce tigers, maybe, or lions, or some fierce animals, wolves, maybe. This is where there's something. One of those Buddhist philosophers, Vasubandhu, came up with a very interesting notion. He says this consciousness floats around, and okay, here let me talk one more thing before I mention Vasubandhu. So this person sees an animal and is reborn as that kind of animal, okay, because that is his mind. Okay, now let's take another scenario where this person's karma is not so bad, but he's going to be reborn as a human being, and this is where we have a bit of idea from Vasubandhu. Vasubandhu gives a very interesting explanation how this being, or how we, when we are reborn, choose our sex, whether we are born as male or female. So here, this is what he says in his Abhidhamma Kosha, chapter 3, section 15a-b. He says, this being to be born, the intermediate being, it possesses sight or vision by virtue of its karma. Even though far away, he sees the place of his rebirth. There he sees his father and mother mating or in union. If he is male, lust of a man arises towards the mother. When it is female, the lust of a woman arises towards the father. Now, so here in other words, this being to be born, this intermediate state, intermediate being, he sees the future parents mating. If he's subtracted to the mother, he becomes a boy child. If he's attracted to the father, it becomes a girl child. It's very interesting. So this is where, well, I'm sure some of you will say, aha, this is a very familiar idea, because we know psychologist called Sigmund Freud came up with this idea too. So the question is interesting, where do you get this idea from? And Freud, as we know, is not someone who likes to acknowledge where his sources, what his sources are. But anyway, we have this interesting idea more than 1,000 years ago. So, in other words, the sexuality of a being is decided upon the moment of rebirth, if you like. So here we come to the interesting idea where, we sometimes hear people say, this is not actually a Buddhist teaching, it's a popular idea. In other words, it's not scripture-based, not sutta-based. But some people will say, for example, it's bad karma to be born as a woman. Now, in a sense, this statement is socially right. In the Buddha's time, even today in India, you see a lot of patriarchalism. In other words, the man is the dominant figure. He's the one who's supposed to be having the upper hand. And generally, you see the guru, usually, not always, usually, is a man, a bearded man. Why does he keep a beard? Because a beard is a symbol of masculinity. And it is interesting, it is perhaps, this is one of the reasons why the Buddha actually prescribed that his monks shave off hair and beard to renounce this idea of dominating anyone. So, on the other hand, the non-Buddhist religions, they have this idea that women are inferior for various reasons. And because of this, the women, in other words, have only two roles. One is to give pleasure to men, and the other is to make babies for men. So once you have this kind of idea, you can understand how women are the underdogs, so to speak, they are oppressed beings. And when the religion promotes this kind of idea with stories of how even the gods are playful, they have lots of women as their mates and so on, then you find this kind of idea becomes reinforced. And I think this is one of the very powerful reasons that explains why in India, for example, you see men raping women, sometimes gang raping and so on, and this is something that needs to be understood and corrected. So, in a sense, despite the 2,500 years of Buddhism, the message still has not got through yet, that men and women are equal, they have to be respected, and it is not a bad karma to be a woman. However, if you are born in India in that kind of situation, anywhere, not just India by the way, anywhere where women are kind of treated in such an inferior way, You can say that's really bad karma. But it's not because of religion. It's because of social bias, because of a lack of education, lack of proper political will, if you like. So all this thing must be changed. It can be changed, in other words. So it's not due to karma here. It is something in the present moment that can be changed, that needs to be changed. So in other words, to be born as a man or woman is in a sense psychological, in a sense how this person thinks and feels, and then the person will follow that kind of mental state and be reborn accordingly. So here, coming back to this idea of how we are reborn, now we look at another situation where the person has passed away and in a sense is not yet reborn in a new life, let's say as another human being. So this is a different level of discussion now. So this is section 6.2, okay? What happens when a person is reborn. So here, according to the pre-Buddhist belief, this A dies and it goes through a state, we can call it a departed, okay? According to the pre-Buddhist belief, he remains there. One belief is he remains there for 1 year, especially among the Brahmins. And then a living family member has to make offerings, prayers for this person. Interestingly, usually it's the father, and mothers are not mentioned. And then if these prayers are properly given, then this departed will move on to a higher state, become a deva, maybe become a divine being. If not, then he will come back and be reborn in this world. So this is one of the beliefs. In fact, this rebirth belief in India took many forms and evolved in many ways. In the case of the Buddha, he does accept this idea that there is the departed, and that the departed here are called the pretas, which is a Sanskrit word. And this is our subject of our next talk, which I'll go into in some detail. But today it's just an overview on how we are reborn and how we can, in a sense, influence how we are reborn. And as I said before, a lot depends on how we live our life now. What about helping other beings to be reborn? I mean, sometimes, it's not easy for us to live a good life, so to speak, a kind of morally virtuous life. So here is where we have this teaching of what's called dedication of merits. In early Buddhism, for example, the Buddha teaches that offerings can be made to let's say, to the monks, or some kind of virtuous action. And this kind of good action generates good karma, and the giver, especially if it's a relative, but not necessarily so, it can be anyone, having done this good act, this person thinks of the departed. Of course, ideally it will be a relative, otherwise it will be a friend. In fact, because of the teaching of rebirth, the Buddha has said that we have been reborn so many times that somehow we are related to one another. So in that sense, anyone can, so to speak, to use a very simple word, pray for the departed. We are somehow related. But it must be done properly in the Buddhist way. Let me just cut down to the chase, so to speak, and simply say that the key idea in a Buddhist action of dedicating of marriage is loving kindness. It's not just a ritual. That ritual must be empowered with loving kindness. There must be this sense of joy. Loving kindness is a kind of joy. It is unconditional acceptance, as I said, of yourself and of this other person. During that moment of dedication of marriage, let's say you're offering, giving alms food to some monks or to some people who need help. While preparing the offering, you're happy. You do it in a mindful, joyful way. While giving, you do it in a mindful, joyful way. And after the act also, you are joyful and mindful. And in doing so, then you say, okay, all these good deeds I've done, I dedicate to so and so, may so and so be well and happy. So, how this action works is, this preta or this being that is nearby and watching or sense what's going on, feels happy. Okay? And because of this joy arising, this being falls from that unhappy state, the preta state, and is reborn in happier states. So this is the gist of it, and we'll come to this point in greater detail later on when we talk about the Tirokuta Sutta in another talk. Now, there is this Brahmin who asked the Buddha about the pretas. It says this Brahmin called Janusoni, he asked the Buddha, he says, we often give offerings to our departed. Do they receive this? Then the Buddha replies and says that if it's reborn as a human elsewhere, he will not receive it because it's reborn elsewhere as a human. If it's reborn as an animal, again, he will not be able to receive it. If it's reborn as a deva, he doesn't need it. If it's reborn as a hell being or asura, he won't be able to get it either. The Buddha says, when this being is reborn, only in one state, that is, as the departed, the preta, is able to receive these offerings, this so-called dedication of marriage. Now, what's interesting here is that Janusoni goes on to ask a number of questions about this kind of offering. And at one point, the Buddha makes a very interesting statement. The Buddha says that how a person benefits from through his past karma, or not benefit through his past karma. In the same sutta, the Buddha says that in the case of someone who lives a generous life, who's kind, who makes offerings and donations, but he is not morally virtuous. In other words, he doesn't keep the precepts. He's generous, he does charity, social work, but he does not keep the precepts. In other words, simply put, he's a bad guy, let's say, okay? But he's generous. So the Buddha says, giving is always fruitful. Whether good or bad people give, the good karma is there. But the benefit of karma is different, depending on the mental state of the giver. Now, if the giver is both generous and good and kind, morally virtuous, then of course this person will be reborn in the happy human world or in the divine world, in other words. Especially if he's also mindful and he does meditation, his mind is peaceful, then of course he'll be reborn in the higher states of the Deva world. On the other hand, if he does generous deeds but he's immoral, is bad, the Buddha says he'll be reborn in the lower states, either as an animal or in a suffering state. If he's born as an animal, he will receive this good karma, so to speak. This good karma will kind of fruit again, and he'll be reborn as animals that are loved by the humans. The suttas especially mention, for example, be reborn as a cow, as a chicken, an elephant, perhaps a horse, animals which are respected in India, if you like, or in the ancient world. This explains in a very interesting way why certain people, even today in modern Singapore, we see people taking really good care of their pets, and sometimes they love their pets even more than they love humans, and these pets live a much better life, but they're still animals. But they get all that wonderful special care, even grooming and so on and so forth. They get the benefits, but they're still animals. So in other words, whether a person is a normal worldling or a monk or a religious person, if the person is generous but does not do the precepts, will be reborn as an animal in the next life, and these animals will be well cared for, but we will still be animals. So this is one of the very interesting notions about taking care of our pets also. You can say our pets remind us of this important teaching where we need not only to be generous but also to keep our precepts well. So karma, in other words, is a mixed basket. The karma may fruit differently. It's not something going in a straight line. There are many strands and they kind of interact and so on. So this is where we need to, as I said earlier, again, make sure in this life our karma is wholesome. However, one last point before I finish here, there's something we can do about manipulating karma, in a sense. That is to make sure the last thought moment of our life is a wholesome one. It's like as if dying is like as if we are driving a car. So and death is when you have to put on the brakes and stop the car. So if you are driving at a safe speed and the road conditions are good, then you brake and you stop gently. Okay, so that's a good death, a good rebirth, if you like. But at other times, perhaps you're speeding, so you have to brake, and then maybe the road is not safe, and accidents do happen, so it's not a good death. In other words, this last mental process when a person dies is not within his control. We have no control over this last moment. So although we hear the teaching that the last thought moment decides our rebirth, we really have no control over it. What we can control is what happens before that. Here we go back to that analogy of driving. You have to make sure your car is well maintained, that you know how to drive properly, and you do drive properly, avoiding bad weather, make sure the weather is good, you drive properly and so on, and you brake carefully and so on. So if you do, in other words, if you already have this habit of being a good driver, then you're likely to be more careful when you brake. So again, we come back to this idea of keeping the precepts, living a wholesome life while you live. And when you do that, because of your habitual good karma is wholesome, then this gives you the momentum towards the end, also have a wholesome last thought process. And one of the things we can do, of course, is going for refuge. Right? In other words, reflecting on the Buddha, that's the idea of awakening, that someone here, although he was born as human, is able to rise above the human level and become fully liberated. Then there is his teaching, which we can practice today. And there are the saints, the Sangha, who have practiced this. And we are inspired by these three jewels in that way, so that our minds are at peace and we follow their example. The next important thing is to reflect on impermanence. In other words, we practice this perception of impermanence, understanding that it will bring us stream winning in this life itself. I've mentioned this many times before. Our singular goal as Buddhists, our primary goal as Buddhists must be at least to attain stream winning in this life itself. Because if we don't, then we will be, the likelihood is to be reborn in the subhuman states where we're going to get caught there for a long, long time. It's very difficult to get out of the current state because that we are not able to calm our minds, and we don't have a chance to study the Dharma in those lower states. So being in a human state is a great time and space for us to cultivate our minds, and reflecting on impermanence is what, according to the 10 suttas of Samyutta 25, is what will guarantee extreme winning in this life itself. Let me just say for today, read out Samyutta chapter 25, any of the 10 suttas that you like. All the suttas will teach you how to practice, how the practice of perception of impermanence guarantees you stream winning in this life itself. So my point here is that as long as you practice in this way, you take those refuges, you practice reflection of impermanence, then you build up this wonderful good karma so that you are reborn happily in the next life. So for today, we will end our study here. Let us now close with a short reflection. What we do right now will decide our future. So the future is not something that comes as a gamble. We can prepare for it. And the best way to prepare ourselves is to be at peace with ourselves, be at peace with our body, be at peace with our speech, at peace with our minds. Regarding the 3 doors of action, reflecting in this way is wonderful good karma, where the power of such good karma may we be empowered with wisdom and courage to aspire to attain stream winning in this life itself. And by the same token, by the power of the 3 jewels, let us send out our loving kindness to all those whom we love, those we care for, and those who are kind to us. May they be well and happy. To our teachers and those practicing the Dharma, may they be well and happy. And by the same token, too, let us send out our loving kindness to all those who are seeking the truth. May they find what the truth that liberates them in this life itself. And for those who are struggling with great difficulties in finding the truth, may they see the liberating truth for themselves in this life too. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.